that I haven't seen anybody else on any YouTube video so far talk about is that the wool insulation might slide down.
So when installing bat insulation, wool, fiberglass or otherwise, you don't want to compress the fibers, then they start losing their insulative value and start gaining conductive value. If you look at a chart, it's a bell curve. But when you compress it and then release it, it wants to expand back to its natural form, and that's where you want it when it's in the cavity for its maximum R value.
So I guess that would mean not stuffing it too tight, and giving it room to re-expand once it's in there. Does that sound right?
Yep.
Okay. So the insulation is stuffed into every possible crevice, and the closer you get to the wall and the more time you spend stuffing it in, the more you'll start to notice the little tiny holes and places where insulation can be stuffed. Very thorough here. And there's wool insulation behind, it's stuffed into the beams, continuing all the way across behind the wood paneling as well, and under there, as above the wheel well as well. And also in the door. Look at that. There is a lot of insulation in the door. Oh, yes, yes. So around the airbags, it's uninsulated, so as to not interfere with the function of those airbags. Good plan. Look at, so this is the headliner area that used to just be empty space, bare metal, and then the cargo liner, well, no, what is that called? Headliner fabric here, that Dave has stuffed in wool insulation into.
There's nothing you can get into. So I'm sitting here stuffing for hours with just with an Allen wrench stuffing stuff in there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is a very time consuming part of the project. Very time consuming. So budget plenty of time to do this, and patience. I'm curious, did you cut yourself ever or anything like that on the metal edges? Was that difficult? No. The stuff in the van here is not sharp. It's really beveled over and whatnot. Okay.
I mean, if you're reaching into a larger cavity, the more sensitive areas on your arms could get irritated from running over the edges, but you're not going to get cut.
All right. Good to know. Good to know. Something that Dave and I talked about is how I haven't seen anybody else on any YouTube video so far talk about is that the wool insulation might slide down the cavities as the vehicle rattles and moves, just like at home. If you have any kind of loose fill insulation or the bats, and you're opening and closing doors, then that rattles the walls, and the insulation gradually can collapse down the wall. So we didn't want that to happen in this build.
So a product that might come in handy when installing the bats in large cavities that aren't broken up by framing members of the van. It's a product called a stick pin. It's like a nail with a washer on the back that you can glue to the metal panels. You can use even just silicone, stick it on there. Once that sets up, you can stick your bats on that, stick the nail right through it, and then there's another washer that goes in front of it and will hold it in place, and you can cut them off with wire cutters to the desired depth you want, and then you can put your panel in place. Just make sure that they're cut back far enough so they don't hit the back of your panel.
And you have a picture of that we'll put on the screen, but you can show us here. Okay. Oh, interesting. So this part is the part that sticks to the wall?
Yep, and the silicone squeeze right out between those holes and hold it firmly.
And then the wool or whatever the bat insulation would stick.
Is held back by that broad washer on the front.
That's clever. Great idea.
And I end up using fiber reinforced reflective tape there. Very strong, very well adhered. I wasn't convinced that the painter's tape was going to hold the weight of the wool in the cavity.
Because you're keeping it there in the cavity the whole time.
Right.
Yeah. So to deal with thermal bridging, which is the the conduction of...
The conducting of the cold through the metal into the wood. So we put a barrier of the Reflectex bubble wrap in between anywhere that the metal components would make contact with the back of the panel to create that thermal break.
We used Reflectex. There wasn't time to get the foam product, which is actually more insulative than the Reflectex, that has the aluminum lining on it. I'll put a link to that, though, down in the description below. That's a superior product, partly because you won't be able to flatten it like you can the Reflectex, and then the Reflectex loses its insulative properties and its radiant heat properties when it's flat, when the bubbles are burst, and also when it's flat up against a surface and there's no air gap, that it isn't doing anything to radiate the heat from the sun back out, or with the bubbles burst, it's not doing anything to prevent the cold or the heat from coming in. So Reflectex isn't all it's cracked up to be if it's not used properly. So behind these panels, Dave used the Reflectex because we were out of time to get the superior product, but was sure to not press the panels back against it so hard that it would pop the bubble.
So you hear that? You can hear it. That's when you lose your R values, when you're bursting your bubbles.
You don't want to burst any bubbles.
But when you have a larger surface area and you're fastening something over it, you're going to be hard pressed to pop any bubbles.
That's great.
The amount of surface area there makes it pretty hard to compress. So as long as you don't over tighten your fasteners,
okay,
it shouldn't be negatively affected.
Okay, good. So don't over tighten the fasteners, and then you'll probably maintain that insulative quality, which is R1, I think, if any Rs at all.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Oh, yes. Okay, so you can see that it's for the bubbles, the Reflectex that's behind the walls, the bubbles have not been pressed flat. Okay, so that is there between the wall, the panels, and the metal in order to provide a thermal break so that the cold metal doesn't just leach cold into the room. But because it doesn't have an air gap between that aluminum lining on the Reflectex and the metal, that radiant ability of it is lost. So it's only serving as a thermal break right now. Yeah. So when you do your build and you decide to use Reflectex, that's something to keep in mind. Are you going to be able to have an air barrier between it and whatever direction it is you want to radiate the heat out towards? Okay.